Welcome everyone to the Dr. Todd Talks Tune Show. I'm your host, Dr. Todd Samra, and our subject today is the music of Elton John and Bernie Taupin. And we are going to explore 4 of their songs and talk about why they work. And what this really comes down to, I didn't want to give away the real name of the episode too soon, but really the name of the episode is Plagal Relationships in their song. I didn't say that probably well, but Plagal Relationships. And you're like, what's a Plagal relationship? Well, a Plagal relationship is named after Darth Plagueis. If you're familiar with Star Wars, he would have been the, I'm kidding, the Sith Lord Plagal. What it really has to do is the fourth, that relationships that are connected by a fourth. Now we can have in music all kinds of different harmonic relationships, and essentially they're all based on a scale. And those are the notes of the scale. But what I can do is play a chord with each one of those notes. And then those chords become the chords of that particular key, in this case, C major. Well, some chords are more important than others. So if I'm in C major, this is like the most important chord. And an authentic relationship is one that's related by fifth. And that would be like the music of Beethoven, Haydn, Mozart, etc. But what we're going to talk about today is a plagal relationship, so chords that are related by a fourth. And then 4, 1, etc. And we know a lot of songs that use this particular chord progression. Like last week's episode was dedicated to Debussy, and I ended by saying, well, Debussy is like the Elton John. Well, how is that? I mean, that was kind of a little bit of a leap. But what it really comes down to is the use of that 4 chord. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry. So like, for example, Clair de Lune. There's the 1 chord. Now here's the 4 chord. Once it finally resolves, there's the 4 chord. So using that chord, using that harmonic relationships, those 2 chords with each other, creates a very warm feeling. And part of the reason for that is they share a common tone. And that common tone that they share is the tone of the key that you're in. That creates a very strong bond between those 2 particular chords. And you're familiar with this because we have it in all kinds of different songs. Like, for example, Amazing Grace. 1 chord, and it goes to the 4 chord, and back to 1. Danny Boy. 1 chord, 4 chord. Now there's the 5 chord. There's that 4 chord again. So it's a very emotional chord. It's used in a lot of love songs. It's used in a lot of emotional music, like Clair de Lune. I think Debussy knew exactly what he was doing, using that plagal relationship between them. Well, that is very much the case with Elton John and Bernie Taupin. Now, if you're like, why is he saying Taupin and not Taupin? Well, Taupin rhymes with Chopin. There's not a lot of humor in this industry, ladies and gentlemen. Music history, not necessarily synonymous with like humor. So we go for, he was, his grandparents were of French descent. So I think the AU would definitely be pronounced like an O. So Taupin or Taupin, like Chopin. All right, I'm moving on. So let's look at just 4 of these songs that actually use this plagal relationship, this 1 chord to 4 chord relationship. And let's start with Daniel, because it's maybe the most straightforward. It's in C major. But the part that really we want to focus on is the refrain, is the chorus section. Daniel, my brother. That's the 4 chord. 1. 4 chord again. Back to 1. Now down to 6. Now to 4 again. Now he's going to borrow the minor 4, another 4. And back to 1, then the 5 of the 2. So he's really taking advantage of that relationship. So there's one example. Another one that works really well is the song Your Song, which is in E flat major, which a lot of love songs are in E flat major. A lot of them. Guitarists don't like this key. There it is, 1 to 4 relationship. Here's the 1 chord, here's the 4 chord, with a major, major 7 to get a little bit complicated. Now then the 5. 3, the 6, let me get us, put the 7th in the bass. That's a complicated one to get in that diminutive, but there's the 4 chord again. So we get a lot of that 4 chord in this song as well. That right from the very beginning. Kind of what defines that song, if you will, is kind of that chord progression right from the very start. Now what these two songs have in common, Daniel, in Your Song, is that they're both in major keys. And they're both relying on the major chord, the 1 chord, and the 4 chord is also, naturally, major in a major key. So both these songs are utilizing major 1 chord, major 4 chord. But one very clever thing that we can do with songwriting is we can borrow. We can borrow from, like, let's say, the parallel minor. In other words, the minor key that would be constructed starting on the same home note. Well, that's what they do in Daniel. For example, the first chord is a G minor chord. Now the 4 chord in G minor should also be minor. It would be a C minor chord, and then back to G minor again. But what they do is they borrow the 4 from the major key, and we get this. There's that 4 chord from the major key. Back to the minor 1. Actually, this song is actually in B flat major. And then here's that major 4 chord again. So forth. So he's using a lot of the 4 chord in the song, right from the very beginning, going to the what would be the relative minor. G minor is related to B flat major. They share a key signature. I don't want to get too into that right now. So we have that G minor chord. She packed my bags last night, pre-flight. So he's using that 1-4 relationship with that borrowed, and then in the chorus, when it finally gets to B flat major, we have the 4 chord again. And you're like, oh, I see, they're just like mixing it up a little bit. Like once you use a chord progression, you can't use it again. And that wasn't the first time that Bernie Taupin and Elton John actually used that chord progression, even in that same key. In other words, part of the inventiveness is not sitting down and coming up with a great chord progression. I mean, you can do that. But part of it is, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to construct a melody above it? That's really what the listener's ear is gravitating towards. That's what they're singing back is the melody, not the chord progression. But the melody is built on the chord progression. So here we see the exact same 2 chords, G minor to C major, but now in a completely different song. This song came first. I'll do it again. Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. First song, first chord, G minor chord. When are you gonna come down? Now we get F major, and its 4 is B flat. So he does that there. So they're really strengthening that relationship. That doesn't fit the pattern. 1 chord. There's There's the 4 chord. That would be the 4 chord related to the F chord that came before it. Anyway, you kind of know the rest of the song. So here they're using that exact same chord progression. So Elton John and Bernie Taupin, who's primarily the lyricist. I mean, that's really the relationship. They're kind of like the George and Ira Gershwin. George wrote the music, Ira wrote the words. So, you know, they're working together, though, very closely. So what they're kind of relying on here is really basic songwriting. Just take a chord progression, you have a set of words, it's kind of reaching a melody that you construct based on maybe the rhythm or pattern of the words, but you have to construct that over something. We rely on harmony to generate, if you will, contrast between chords. You just can't have one chord for a whole song. It kind of gets, you know... We need a little bit of that variety. Now, where did this come from? Where did this Plagal relationship come from? And actually, the best story I ever heard was told to me by one of my teachers, Dr. Jody Nagel. And Jody was talking about how it was for lazy organists that would just simply use the foot pedal down here on the bottom. They'd use their left foot, and they'd play this chord, and then everybody would go, Amen. And it's a common tone, so they could just hold their foot on that low pedal down there. And it was basically out of the laziness of organs that the Plagal cadence became synonymous with the Amen. Amen. And that's also easy way to remember what a Plagal cadence is. So it's related to that. So this 1-4 relationship, which is really a basic tool in songwriting, but Bernie Taupin and Elton John really make great use of this chord progression. They're not focusing on the chord progression per se, but what they're doing is just setting themselves up for a certain level of success, if you will. That they're relying on already established methods, if you will, conventions, is a musical convention. An already established musical convention between a relationship between these chords to create a foundation for their song. Then, of course, what really makes it work is the melody and, of course, the performance. He's so dynamic, such a wonderful artist in so many ways. So all of these elements come together to really make so many of their songs great. But at the heart of it, of so many of their songs, are these relationships between the 1 chord and the 4 chord. Thank you for joining us today. I was so excited to present this episode. What color is it now? Is the colors changing? Next episode, we're going to look at some American music between World War I and World War II. And then after that, we're going to look at the music of Antonio Salieri, which should be a very exciting and controversial and mysterious episode. Thank you for joining us. Once again, my name is Dr. Todd Samra, and thank you for watching Dr. Todd Talks Tunes.